Welcome to the Sandwich Crunch, where we navigate the trends and issues affecting boomers and seniors at home, in the workplace, and the community. Very excited to be here and very excited to have you join us today. We're going to be starting a series on estate planning. And I want to preface this with, I did a little bit of an interview with quite a few members of our community, if they'd like to hear from an attorney or if they'd like to actually hear a family communication and a family connection. So, based on their response, they wanted to hear from my dad and I. So my dad is my guest. Dad, Richard Brockett, thanks for coming.
Well, thank you. This is a new experience for me, being on TV, and well, just the interview process alone is new.
Oh, it's going to be fun, Dad, because we're going to be talking about something that you have instilled in Calvin and I, my brother, and our family from a very young age. And I will share with our audience is that I can recall when I was about 28 years old, my son's father and I wanted to go to Canada. And I recall talking to you and Mom, and we talked to Nana and Papa, and we said, well, will you take Alex and Austin, will you watch them? And you said, nope. Not unless you have a trust, a healthcare directive, and a will. And the look on our face and the feeling of pits in our stomach was huge. But it was a huge eye-opener for us. And so I wanted to ask you why you asked us to do that. I know now, but I thought it would be good to share with the audience because one of the huge statistics is that over 70% of families in the U.S., this is documented since last year, February 2013, do not have an estate plan. That includes a healthcare directive. So I thought, Dad, we could talk about that.
Well, you know, your mom and I looked at that and said, okay, here's two young boys and their parents are going off on a trip. What happens if they don't come back? And all of a sudden, we've got two young boys and a mess on our hands. Not with the boys, but a mess financially and medically, or who knows what could have happened. And I don't even know for sure where I had that drilled into me of making sure that you had a will. But somewhere along the line, I became very aware that that was at a minimum what you needed to have, was a will to explain to us and the world, so to speak, what would happen to your children if you didn't come home. And I remember you and Peter were a little bit astounded that we were saying, hey, you can't go anywhere without a will.
No, it was an understatement, Dad.
Yeah. But
that was the first conversation.
You came up with it, and I think for the reasons I just explained, a lot of people look at a will and think it's only for old people. And that's far from the truth. A will is for anybody, just to be able to tell the world that if I'm not here tomorrow, this is what I want to have happen to my things and my family, children in particular when you're younger. And it's not a big deal to generate a will. And I don't know at the time whether you realized it or not, but if you do not have a will that you have generated, you do have a will, because the state of California has laws, and the courts and the state will come in and take over everything that you own, your children, your house, your car, everything. And they will apply the laws as they exist, which then by default becomes your will. Mm-hmm. Whether you like it or not, of course you're not here, so I mean it doesn't affect you in that sense, but it affects everybody who is still here. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. I think that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of people do not realize, that without their own will, they have one imposed on them.
That's actually really So true. I actually just spent 2 days, as you know, doing a bereavement facilitation training last week, and we discussed that with many of the hospice nurses. How many people that were in hospice who did not have a will, who hadn't had a healthcare directive, who hadn't had a power of attorney for finance or a power of attorney for their medical and power of attorney for health. They didn't have anything in line, let alone if they needed a trust. And what they had shared and what I have read is that so many people, and particularly now, boomers are saying, we want to know what our parents want, and we need to know. And it's not that we care about where that money goes. We just want to know, what does mom or dad want if something happens, or something happens to us? How are we going to be taken care of? So it's not just the will itself. And what I want to kind of pull us into today is really focusing on one aspect of the estate, and that is the healthcare directive. Because you can have a healthcare directive without a will. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, the reason why I wanted us to talk about this is I recall the doctor calling me when Mom was hospitalized in 2012 and saying, "Hello, Miss Kuhn, do you have your mother's DNR? Do you have your mother's health care directive?" In a very serious tone, and that scared the living heck out of me. And I thought, oh my gosh, don't they have that on file? I mean, I knew we had it, but I thought that the hospital had it. And that scared me. And what opened my eyes up was during that period of time, I started asking a lot of questions, asking a lot of people, do you have that in place? And what I found was so many people don't have it in place. So I want to first of all thank you and Mom for putting that together, because now we know what you want, and unfortunately we lost Mom, but it opened up a huge discussion in our family about what each of us wants.
Well, I kind of look at a lot of estate planning as there are two sections of it. There's one section that takes effect when you leave this earth. That's your will, a trust if you have it. And in going through my papers in preparation for this conversation, I ran across a document I'd forgot all about. And it's a document called Disposition of Your Remains. And I got thinking, if a person doesn't fill out this little one-page document and sign it, they are leaving that decision to their kids or to somebody else. And that's not fair to force that decision on somebody else. It's something that each of us should say, this is what I want to have happen to my body, and you fill out that one little paper. And I'd forgot all about that, so that kind of adds one to that side. On the other side of estate planning is what we're talking about now, the medical directive, and along with that you have a power of attorney, and my mind just went blank. There's one more.
Power of attorney for healthcare, for finance, and for medical.
Right. Well, there's two powers of attorney. One is for your financial situation, and the other is what they refer to as a durable power of attorney, which is for your medical decisions. And it's very critical. I believe it's critical. As an example, I have a neighbor. The gentleman is about 81 years old, and he was up on a ladder, fell off the ladder, knocked himself out, cut himself up a little bit, and then after they took him off to the ambulance and the helicopter to the hospital, etc., then his wife was stuck with the fact they did not have, here they are 80 years old, they did not have a medical health care directive. Well, I have been picking up their mail and picking up their prescriptions and driving either one of them to their doctors as a neighbor. And in the meantime, we sat around and had some very serious conversations about estate planning in general, and particularly the medical part, because they had just experienced that. And so Steve she now really understood how important it is, and they're going to an estate attorney within the next couple weeks, and hopefully they'll get everything all put together. And it makes me feel good to know that they are doing all of this while they're, in a good frame of mind. And not that either one of them has a mental problem, but it just goes to show how quickly. I mean, how long does it take to fall 12 feet off a ladder?
And you don't have to be 80 years old.
No, and your life
You could be 16.
Your life and your spouse's life, etc., are changed instantly. And you just hope you never have to have the medical directive come into play. But without it, you can have some serious problems.
Well, there's a really great program out there called 5 Wishes that you and Mom have, and actually I'm very familiar with as well. And we have it, and I actually had sent it off to our stepdaughter, stepson, to my sons, and to everybody we know to, hey, I don't care how old you are, get this complete. At least have this, because we want to know what's going to happen, if something were to happen to you. I know it was very interesting when we were talking with Mom during a period of time, and both my youngest son and my stepdaughter were very vocal about what they wanted done with their lives, and they told us we were going to be traipsing all around the world to, share their remains. So it was actually a little comical, so it brought some humor into it. But it was talking about a very serious subject, but it got it on the table. And I think that's one of the hardest things, is for families to take that step, to say,
Yes.
you know what, we need to talk about this, and it needs to come from a non-judgmental place. It needs to be coming from an open mind, and it needs to incorporate all the siblings. It needs to incorporate everyone who's involved, because it's not just a sibling's issue or a parent issue. It's everyone involved, and it is a disservice to a family if one sibling steps up and starts taking care of things without consulting the others and bringing it together as a family.
Well, the 5 Wishes, the way your mom and I did it, let me preface this a little bit. A number of years ago, one of my business partners passed away, and he left a financial mess. And shortly after that, I was telling you and your brother about that, and your brother said, "Dad, don't leave us a mess." And I took that to heart, and it wasn't long after that Mom and I got everything put together. We'd had a will before, but we didn't have all the rest of this stuff in place. And so we worked on getting all the rest of it put together. And I guess the impetus for doing all that was that we just, we didn't dare leave everything a mess. Like your brother said, don't leave us that.
Well, the story I know you're talking about is your old business partner, or one of your partners, and that was a very tragic situation. I mean, he had actually taken time to write his will and his trust.
No, just the will.
Just the will. And he didn't consult the actual laws of the state of California. And now there are legal ramifications on how a will needs to be set up, who signs it, because a will in the state of California, if it's notarized, it's thrown out. It has to have at least 2 signatures, but you need to consult an actual estate attorney to make sure that whatever it is that you are doing is proper and correct now, because neither of us are experts at that. However, we already saw some fallout on what happened. In his case, it was a very, very, it was a big estate, and there were some very strong family issues that were involved. And to this day, and this is what, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Or is it 15 years ago?
Yeah,
Well, it's a
yeah.
long time ago, and it's still in court. It's still in court.
Yeah, what had happened, and again, I'm not a professional on this, but I've been directly exposed. My partner had just retired, and he had recently married the woman he'd been living with for quite a while. And so he sat down at his computer and he typed up a will. And he specifically said, this is what I want to have happen to my estate. And then he dutifully went down to a notary public and had it notarized. And he thought everything was great. Then, unfortunately, after he passed away, the will, of course, went into court. The judge took one look at it and threw it in the trash. Because, number one, it was typewritten, and the signature was simply notarized. And that doesn't make it in the state of California. You need a minimum of 2 unrelated witnesses to witness you signing that will. They have to be in the presence of you signing it. And then that becomes a legal document. And so now the state of California comes in and they apply their laws to your estate. And as you just said, that estate, the last I heard, was still not settled, and that's got to be, at least 10 years ago. So you can imagine 10 years of battling in probate court to try and get this thing straightened out. And to this day, I don't know if it's ever totally cleared the courts. But it all started with the greatest of intentions. Get a will. Mm-hmm. So he got a will. He just didn't do it the right way.
Well, and the other thing that creates is that creates a massive amount of dissension within a family, financial issues, financial struggles. It creates all this turmoil that now exists in a family because nobody knows what's going to happen, or they're fighting over this, or there's all of a sudden that long lost cousin shows up out of the woodwork that says, well, I get my something, and it's not clarified. And on another note, if we go back to like the healthcare directive, it's just as messy. There was a woman that I knew that recently had a heart attack, and she had gone in. She was 70 years old, 6-way bypass surgery. No healthcare directive, no DNR, and a DNR represents do not resuscitate. And that is something you have to have taken care of with your doctor and signed over by your doctor. Actually, you should have your healthcare directive with your doctor, your primary physician. And I thought, she's got a family. What would have happened if she died and in the hospital, or she was put in a place where she was now unconscious, and there was a decision that had to be made about the welfare of her life, whether it was going to be extending her life, putting her in a nursing home, or was it bringing her home into hospice? What was it that she would have wanted? And I just read a statistic, and if I'm correct, I believe it's 65% of the doctor's guesses, because they generally have to guess what the family members want, are wrong. So they're guessing based on the information that they have talking to the family members, and they are generally wrong about what that person really wants. So that healthcare directive, or the 5 witches, which can both act together, can answer a lot of those medical questions and give the family, I have to tell you, Dad, it's peace of mind. You and Mom gave us peace of mind. I want my kids giving us peace of mind. With a son who's going to be in the fire department, and with another one going into the criminal work. I would like to have some peace of mind knowing that our kids have got something set up.
And it's all of this that we're talking about is not that difficult to set up. Mm-mm. It's not that expensive. The biggest roadblock to doing it is doing it. Mm-hmm. You just have to get going. And the hardest part, as you mentioned before, is bringing up the subject. And, you know, you can have a family Thanksgiving dinner, etc., which would be maybe not the most appropriate time, but you've got the whole family there. And it is a subject that you need to have everyone involved in. On the 5 wishes, what your mom and I did, we individually went through the 5 wishes, filled in all the blanks, and put down how we would like to have things done. Excuse me. And then when we actually went to our estate attorney to get our medical directive put together, we gave him the 5 wish booklet and said, we want these incorporated into the medical directive, which he did, which I thought was great. And it forced us to do a whole lot of thinking beforehand of what do we want? You know, what do we want to happen to us? Because as I said, the 5 wishes and the medical directive affect you while you're alive. You know, none of us know when we're going to fall off a ladder or jaywalk out here and get clipped. You just don't know when that's going to happen, but it forces you to think about it. And obviously none of us want to think about the end of life, but that's one great leveler of mankind, is we all are going to experience that at some point in time. And the more prepared you are, the easier it is not only for you, but for your children and your spouse, however, you know, whatever your circumstances are. And it's, like I say, it's probably harder to get started on the conversation than it is to do all the paperwork.
That is true. Now, I got to say, it's not a conversation for a restaurant.
No.
This is a conversation that has to have guidelines that everybody's involved with, everybody has their say, but it's honoring the person or persons that you're discussing, whether it's mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. It's their will, it's their decision, and everybody can have their voice. However, this is what they've earned, this is what they've done. They can do whatever they want, and these are their wishes that they need to be expressed to the family, because if they're not expressed to the family and they don't understand what they want, especially when it comes back to the healthcare directives and so on, and also to the will, then there's no surprises. Then there's not all of a sudden this, because I know we experienced on my husband's side a very horrible surprise. And it was unfortunate because the healthcare directive that was placed gave power of attorney both financially, medically, and for health care to one person. And that was the number one thing you don't do, is you need to have those 3 individuals separate, because it makes checks and balances. But overall, this is a discussion to sit down with your family. I actually have, I invite all of you to my Facebook page, The Sandwich Crunch. I've been putting on a lot of different articles that deal with this, with a lot of resources that you can go to through the American Bar Association and through Aging with Dignity and through various other organizations that you can tap into for not only finding out about information, but also about how to put together a meeting. And a meeting oftentimes may require having a mediator there or having your attorney, an estate attorney there, so that things can be talked about in a very calm manner. Everybody can voice their choices or voice their opinions, but also so it's in honor of the parent or the person, whomever it is that's putting together the will. Dad, you've been doing such a great job with us.
Well, like your brother said, don't leave us a mess. And I've got so many little things that I'm involved in, at least to me it seems like a lot, that I want to make sure that you understand when I'm gone what it is that needs to be taken care of. And this, of course, deviates from the medical thing, because that's what takes place while I'm still here. And then after I'm gone, all of that other stuff is kind of cast in concrete, so to speak. But while I'm here, there's, and hopefully still of sound mind, then the decisions, particularly the medical decisions, are the most critical. And as we get older, we all face more and more medical decisions to make. We have more things that aren't working quite like they should, or they're working too well. You know, something is always going just a little bit wrong. And as long as our mind is functioning, we're okay, because we can pretty much dictate, this is what I want to do, etc. But when the mind isn't working quite right and somebody else has to make the decisions, that's where you hope you have laid the groundwork to say, this is, if I get in that condition, this is what I want you to do for me, or to me, as the case may be. And it's really not that difficult. And I think that 5 Wishes book is a great asset for people to sit down. You know, they can take it and on their own, at their own pace, with nobody else around, they can go through that book and answer it truthfully. This is what I want. And then once they get it all done, and it was surprisingly easy, when I did it at least, then once you get that all done, now you can incorporate it. I believe the 5 Wishes, you can actually sign off on the book, and or maybe there's another paper with it. I don't remember. We didn't do it that way. So you can have a legal medical directive in the form of just this book, or you can add to it, which in our case we did.
Well, on that note, Dad, that is an excellent place to start. And for us, that is what we've been doing with the kids now. So I want to share with our audience, thank you for listening. And we hope you will join us in this series. This is Dad and me talking about estate planning. And yes, I will bring in an attorney, but this does require legal guidance as well. But we ask that you take the time to set up your own will, to get your healthcare directive, and give your family peace of mind. Thank you for joining us on Sandwich Crunch, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.